Hi everyone, welcome back to Plum Mashable. So today's video is going to be part 8 of my card making basics series. Today we're going to be talking about colour, so let's go ahead and get to it. Alright, you do not need all of these. I have them all because I'm crazy. We've established this already. It took me a long time to work out which colouring mediums I preferred, and in the meantime I've basically tried all of them. So bear with me while we go through all of these, because this might help you pick which kind of mediums works best for you and therefore where you want to invest your crafting dollars. So I have all the sort of ones in front of me. I have a couple more that I'll grab as we go. I'm just looking around my craft room and going, yeah, no, I forgot about that one. But we'll talk about all of these as a basic kind of start. Now, something I don't think I talked about when we were talking about stamping and sentiments and all that, because I figured it fit better in this sort of colouring and mediums kind of one, is talking about the different kinds of just plain old black ink. So the three, I do have three that I prefer, the other one's in another drawer, that I prefer to stamp with if I'm just using black, either the, I'm just going to move this over a little bit more, either the Hero Arts Intense Black Ink or the Memento Tuxedo Black Ink. The reason I like these two is because they are both alcohol ink friendly, so they're Copic friendly, which means they work beautifully with all my Copic coloured inks. They also do really well with watercolours if I want a watercolour. They don't tend to run as badly or smear as badly as some of the other inks that I have used, like this one. This is my Versafine Onyx Black Ink. The reason you have both is because these ones don't smear, but they don't give as beautiful a crisp black as the Versafine does. The Versafine will give you an absolute crisp and perfect sentiment or stamp, whatever you're doing, every single time. It's a beautiful, beautiful ink. I really do love it. But you just need to understand which one works for different things. If you're someone that's just going to do your little critters and stamp things out, this is stamped out with the Hero Arts ink, this little teeny tiny guy. I'm going to colour him in for you in a minute. Then something like this is fine. It does do a good job of sentiments, it's just not as crisp as it will be with this one. You don't need both. You don't need all three. I started off with the Memento because the Memento is really easy to get here in Australia. I then graduated to the Hero Arts ink. Both are fine. They're both exactly the same as each other. I just really like the Hero Arts ink. I tried it and I loved it. So I have stuck with that one. I've now also got a re-inker. While we're talking about inks that you use on a regular kind of basis, two others that I just need to include in here is your Versamark ink and then your white pigment ink. Versamark is a watermark kind of ink. What that does is if you put it down, it's a sticky ink. So it's great for embossing. Now, embossing powders I'll come into in a little bit longer. We'll talk about embossing powders. But this is what you need to stick down any of those embossing powders. You can also use this to put foil if you're really clever. You can wait for it to dry off a little bit just so it's a little bit tacky. Put some foil on the line, peel it off, and you're going to have foiled lines just as a little extra thing. And there are lots of other ways you can use Versamark as well. So very, very handy one. There's lots of other embossing inks on the market. You don't have to have Versamark, but that's the one that I tried and that's the one I like. A pigment ink, a white pigment ink, for me is a necessity because I like to dull things down a little bit. You can also emboss with this, especially if you're using white embossing powder. This gives a really beautiful finish underneath. It stays wetter longer because it's that pigment, allows the embossing powder to stick to it, and therefore when you sort of go through it, it's fine. It also allows for a slightly crisper sentiment, and because that's got that white sort of underneath it as well. So they're the white inks. I'm going to keep talking about white. I'm going to keep talking about inks for a little bit longer. These two are stuff that is... They do fall into the nice to haves, but it's just another kind of ink, so I feel like it does sort of fit in here. These are stays on ink, and what this means is that you can put these on basically anything and they're going to stay on there. So there's solvent ink pads. I need to do this. Oh, do you remember, anyone who's old like me will remember Avon lip balms? There was a cherry, like a strawberry or a cherry one. That's what this smells like. These will stamp onto like vellum and won't smear. They'll stamp onto acetate and won't smear. They will do it on paper. it's just basically an ink that won't move. So unless you actually get some rubbing alcohol out and rub it off, it's not going to come off. Really good too for using with Copics if you want to, but I always find you don't need them with the others. I'm still experimenting with the white, but it's sort of like a hybrid of these two. This one's a red one. I have it in red, green, blue and black, I think. I just like having different colours for different uses, but you definitely don't have to. You can just have black. Okay, last little thing, not last little thing, next kind of inks. Now we're going to move into our colours. We're going to move into talking about colours. And the first one I'm going to start off with is Distress Ink. Now I've done inks v oxides already on my channel. I will link that video down below for you. But Distress Ink, I only have the little teeny tiny cubes. And the reason for that is that number one, I don't use them as much as I use my oxides. My oxides are my go-to, and that's because they blend nicer. I like the finish that oxides give. However, I do like the inks, but because I just invested in the small ones instead. These do come in the full-size pads, the same as these. The oxides don't come in the mini size though, so just something to keep in mind if you are going to start looking at these. There are, at the moment, I think it's 64. There were 60 and they've slowly started adding in more Distress Ink colours, Distress Oxide colours. And when they come out now, they release the whole thing. The only thing you can't get is the little cubes because they come in packs of 4. So when they get to the 4th one, then they release the next one. I won't go too much into the differences because of, like I said, that's in that other video. I like having both because I like being able to have the freedom to do both. In my experience, oxides stamp better than inks, but you can use both for stamping. You can use both for ink blending. Again, oxides I find blend better, but inks give you a much more vibrant colour. So it really depends on what kind of colour you're looking for. These ones also work much nicer for me as watercolours. If I want to actually paint with them, these work much nicer. And they do come in a myriad of different colours. I've just picked out the orange and the yellow. The next one we're going to move on to is your Distress Oxide. So like I said, same colours as the other ones, as the inks. They are all the same. Like if I went and got, where is it? Fossilised Amber. There you go. Fossilised Ambers, Distress Oxide and Distress Ink. It's exactly the same colour. They just have slightly different finishes. And just to show you, I did get a piece of paper here to be able to show you these. I'm going to talk about my brushes in just a second. But just to show you, so this is my Oxide one. That's what I get when I ink blend on some Distress Oxide. And then this is what I get when I blend in some Distress Ink. So they are different. They give a different finish. They give a different blend. They give a different look. And it all comes down to which you prefer. Like I said, I like both. I find both are better for different things. So I like to have both. But you don't have to. Definitely don't have to. While we're talking about inks and ink blending, I'm just really quickly going to touch on my brushes. I'm not going to go too far into detail because I feel like these need to go into the nice to haves, which is going to be the next video. But no, actually, they probably do fit better here. Sometimes it's really hard to know what is a need to have and a nice to have. You do need some kind of way to blend these on, so I guess this sort of fits in there. There's two different main ways that you can get ink on to do an ink blend. One is brushes and one is foam blending pads. I am going to grab out, that happens to be ice spruce, so I can use Twisted Stitch off this one. So that's how they blend with the brushes. I prefer brushes for two reasons. Number one, they come in all these beautiful colours, so I can keep track of which ones I use with which colour family. So this is yellow, so it can be used for either pastel yellow or bright yellow, but this tends to be the pastel yellow. And if you've got a black band around it, it's for ink. So these ones are for oxides, has no band. These ones are for inks, has a band. And I have one set of each of the pastel and the standard brushes. These ones are from Tailored Expressions. I've loved them for about, I think I've had them for about 3 years. Absolutely adore these brushes. They're absolutely fantastic. There are lots and lots of good ones. Hero Arts do some good ones. Simon Says Stamp, I've got the smaller ones. I only have one set. These ones are for oxides only. And then I've got like bunches of ones that have come from the internet, from AliExpress or eBay or whatever. Most of the brushes I find are the same, but I like the white bristles. That's the first thing. I prefer the white bristles to the brown bristles, and I like them to be coloured. So that's sort of why I went down this kind of path. The other way you can put your inks on is using a blending tool, and in my, from what I sort of know of them, I don't use them particularly much because I don't particularly like them. I find I can't get nice soft blends with foam, but if I want a really dark heavy blend, these are really good actually. So there's two kind of types of them. You've got your flat and your domed foam. I prefer the domed foam if I'm being honest. So I'm just going to grab my actual green one. I keep them in a bag so that they don't get my drawer dirty. Sounds ridiculous, but they do tend to keep a bit of ink on them and they do get things dirty. So this is Twisted Citron Distress Oxide. I don't, like, it's not bad. I never seem to get as nice a blend with the foam as I do with the brushes, but I can do it. This is a much nicer, much softer kind of feel because it's got the dome to it, which allows the softer kind of addition of ink. Whereas the flat one's just putting it there and making it, like, blending it out by spreading it out, if that makes sense. So there you go. There's foamies, what I call foamies, and also brushes. You can take your pick as to which is better for you. I have both. I don't use both, I will be honest. I tend to lean towards using the brushes at all times. I only pull out the foamies if I'm really desperate. So there's those ones. Okay, last thing on inks. So Distress inks are a dye ink. Distress oxides are a dye pigment ink blend. However, Distress inks, I find, are much more reactive with water than some other kinds of ink, which is why I also have some of these ones. These are just pure dye inks. This one's from Lawn Fawn, this one's from Hero Arts. Both of them, I think, have been, this one's definitely been coming in my Hero Arts kits. These ones I may have picked up a couple of little cubes along the way. They just give us a slightly different kind of finish. So I'll grab this Lawn Fawn one. So this is just my... No, I just did that wrong. Damn. Hold on. I just want to get this off before it sets. I just put dye ink on my Distress Oxide brush, which I try not to do. But anyway. So this is Sugar Plum. It does look a lot like the Distress ink. It's a very similar finish. I just find it's not as water reactive as the ink is. And then this is Cotton Candy from Hero Arts. So just... I actually find that one blends really nicely. These stamp much better in my experience than the Distress do. So if you are someone that likes to stamp in different colours, if you like to use different colours for your sentiments and stuff, would highly recommend getting some actual ink pads. There are like full-size ones of these as well. These ones don't react as well with water, but they do still react in some way, shape or form. Just as a little thing too, I know I've shown you guys this a lot. These are all the colours of Distress Oxide. I have them swatched. I also do have swatches of all my Distress inks. I am a bit bad though, and I think I've fallen behind, so I think I need to do more. I just like to have these out so that I can go, okay, I need a brown. So which brown do I want to use? And I can see them on paper. I need to redo these because they're very, very, very old. But they do the same job. It's just things I would like to do is to redo them. Alright, so we've talked about inks and oxides and all those things. The last sort of little addition to this is when we're talking about liquid forms of colour. So when I say liquid forms, there's three main ones that I have. The first one is a paint. I happen to have Crackling Campfire, which is a distress paint. But I'm also talking watercolour paints here as well. So I just have a couple here from my tin. Distress paint is a kind of reactive acrylic paint, I think. I'll be honest, I don't use it particularly often. I bought this accidentally when I got Crackling Campfire. I just kind of put it in the cart without thinking. So I haven't actually had a really good chance to play with it because the orange actually isn't my favourite. But I do find that a paint of some kind is a really good thing to have in your craft room just in general. I lean towards white and black more than anything else, and I just generally use watercolour paints from Kmart. I then have my whole big tin of watercolour paints. So they live in here. I like having a bunch of different colours and I like playing with them. I like making washy kind of backgrounds. You guys have seen me do that before with watercolours. There's something I tend to experiment with more than use on big cards. So you probably don't see them quite as often. Sorry, I thought that was going to fall down. But they do still exist and I do still use them. Another nice thing to have if you want to add colour. If you're not an ink blender, if you're more of a smoosher and a painter, then a set of watercolours are not completely necessary, but definitely something nice to have. The other ones are mists. I'm not going to spray either of these because I don't want them to go everywhere. But these are the Kaiser mists, or the Kaiser Crafts Kaiser mists. I don't use these as often as I should. They do give you some cool kind of finishes. They're both water-based, or they're all water-based. They're acid-free. They are iridescent, which I don't like so much. I don't like that shine. But I do know you can get distress oxide sprays and distress spray stains, which I would like to experiment with at some point. Don't need to yet, though. The last kind of liquid one, stop shaking things, is Distress Ink Re-Inkers. They also come for the oxides, and I will eventually buy them all. What I wanted to do with these is I bought the re-inkers not just to re-ink my little inks when I do need to, but also because I want to experiment a bit with playing with more liquefied forms of colours. So being able to do that, put a drop of really concentrated colour and water it down, move it around. And obviously this is already on a piece of cardstock that's got other inks and stuff on it. But to be able to do something... Whoops, not like that. I didn't want to do that. But to do something where I can really move it around the page was sort of what I was going for with that. And then just to really quickly... to be able to do finishes like that where you can tell there's lots of different levels of colour. That's why I got this. I've only got 4. I've only done mild experiments with them to this point. But I do like having a liquid form in here to be able to play with as well. Okay, moving on to more controllable mediums, I guess are the right sort of words for the next lot. I'm talking now markers, pens, pencils, those sort of things. So my favourite, and I think you guys are probably going to know this, are Copic markers. I just love how easy these are to blend and how easy it is to get such a beautiful kind of finish. So just as a really quick, and I know that I have to zoom right in here so you guys can see, but just to be able to show you how simple it is to sort of get something that's actually really nice. So this is just using V17. It's a dark kind of pure purple. So I'm just putting that in sort of the areas I want there to be the most amount of shadow. And then I'm coming in with FV2, which feels like a really weird colour combo, but it looks beautiful. And I can just blend those colours together. And you can see how cool it kind of looks with that darker, and I know the FV actually looks like the slightly darker colour. It's not though, it is actually lighter. But that deep purple of the V2 underneath, sorry, the V15 underneath, it gives it this really cool finish. And especially for something like a chameleon, it just, the fluorescence actually really kind of cool. So whenever I'm using Copics, I'm number one remembering to use a blending card. So this is the Express It blending card. I know there are lots of different other kinds of card on the market that will do a similar job. This is the only one I've been able to find in Australia that I like, that gives me the kind of colour finishes that I want. There we go. That's a really easy two colour kind of blend, and then you can come in with something like this. So this is BG13 and BG15. and just put just a little bit just there, and then come in with the 15 and blend it down, and you get this beautiful two-tone kind of little thing. And then just to finish it off, I'm just going to do one simple colour of the yellow. Now, it's not the best one I've ever done in my life, but you get the idea. You can see the colour difference between where I've gone dark around the shadows or down around the edges, and then where it's a slightly lighter. There's then lots of ways you can add extras to this to kind of make it pop even more. But I'm very close to finishing my Copic collection now. I know that sounds ridiculous, but I am. I love them. They're an investment. You can then also buy inks that like re-inkers, so you don't have to buy new markers constantly. Once they're finished, you just refill them. If you're someone that doesn't want to do that, you can get onto Dawn Lewis's re-inking service and you can do it that way. So there's lots of ways to play with Copics. That's not just... You can obviously... Lots of different ways to play. If you look at Copics as an investment, I feel like you're going to really get the most out of them. If you look at them as just something as simple as I'm going to use them until they run out and then they're going to throw them away, then it's not quite so much. So that was the problem I think I had with the Tombos. So these are water-based markers as opposed to alcohol-based. So they don't blend together as nicely. So just to make sure I'm showing you on even playing field. So that was a piece of Express It blending cards. So is this. And this is 757, which is like a dark mulberry kind of colour. If I was trying to blend that into a red, see how I don't really get it? And it doesn't matter how many times I work over this, it's not going to blend nicely from one to the other. Whereas, I'm just going to try and grab just a slightly different kind of colour combo. Whereas if I get Y15, which is this beautiful pumpkin-y yellow, into Y16, and I have these two sitting side by side, I can then grab this one and keep working it until it blends kind of seamlessly in together. And so you can't see that crossover anymore. That's the beauty of Copics, and that's what my Tombos don't do. However, Tombos do other things, and that is including being absolutely beautiful for watercolouring or using with sort of like a paintbrush. So I'm just going to put a little bit of this down onto an acrylic block and just put a little bit of water on with it, and then just grabbing a paintbrush, and you can do colours and washes. I don't really need to do it on the blending card anymore, but you can get that darkness at the top and wash it down into something else using it using like a water kind of idea. I know I'm explaining this really poorly, but see how I can drag that colour down to really light, so I can work from dark to light using the Tombow as kind of my water base. It's very similar to using a watercolour, but they come in markers, which means they're a little bit easier to control. You can also start with this. I've then just got some clean water over here on my block, and you can do the same thing and pull that colour down, but use it from the actual what's on the paper. So depending on how you want to play. So if you think of it that Tombos are your watercolour markers, your water-based things, and your alcohol, and your Tombos, Copics, sorry, I'm having trouble with words, and your Copics are your alcohol, you'll be able to sort of find the happiness in between. It all depends on how you like to colour. If you're a water person, if you like the fluidity, I guess, of water markers and stuff like that, and you like to colour a little bit more, you can also get Zig Clean Colour brush markers, which are similar to Tombos, but they blend a little bit nicer. You can also get those as well. They're harder to get in Australia, which is why I went to the Tombos in the beginning anyway. But there we go, different ways of those. The other one, which is a tried and true favourite and everybody loves, is of course coloured pencils. So these are my Derwents. These have been sitting in my cupboard for near on 20 years, I would go with. And something I was never very good at was blending pencils. I never found the ability to do it. But that said, when I did originally learn how to colour, I wasn't really pretending I knew anything about stuff. I am getting better, and the more I practice, especially now, now that I've sort of got an idea of it with the Copics, I do find that my colouring skills are slightly better with coloured pencils. There are lots of different coloured pencils on the market. I'm not going to sit here and tell you which one you should go and get. These ones, like I said, have been sitting in my collection for, I guess, 20 years. They've been one of the first things I ever bought when I was younger. I saved up for them for months, and I bought them, and they've been with me ever since. They've moved from state to state to state. And I forget I have them sometimes, which is horrible, but they are there. Last thing I'm really going to quickly talk about when it comes to medium, like markers and pens and stuff, are actual markers and pens. So these ones are my Staedtler fine liners, and they are exactly what I just said. They are a fine line. They are very, very, very good for adding in little details. If you've got a really big kind of background with grass and you want to just be out like an ink blended background, you just want to add in some details with some little stripes and stuff like that, these are perfect. I love my fine liners. They're great for writing as well, if you're a planner person as well as a card making person. These are the next step up for me. These are the not the uni pens, the Papermate Flares. And they're just a little bit thicker. They're not a lot thicker, but they're a little bit thicker, and they're more like a texture instead of a fine liner kind of pen. I have them in all a bunch of different colours, and again, just great for adding details, drawing backgrounds, all those sort of things. Not necessarily, but I just figured I'd chuck them in here while we're talking about colour. Alright, the last thing I'm going to add with colour is washi tape, because it doesn't really fit into any other category. If you are someone that likes patterns, if you're someone that likes the different patterns of washi tape and all those sort of things, sometimes using them in card making can be a bit difficult or a bit more complicated. If you can colour block using them, you're going to love washi tape. So these are two sets that I just absolutely adore. These ones are from Marshmallow Studio, and they're the Staz. I'm pretty sure they're still available. I will link them down below. These ones I know aren't. These are the Skittle Stars from Fox and Cactus. I love rainbows. I love pastel rainbows, and I love colour rainbows. I use these more for planning, I'll be honest, but I have found some of the nicest cards I've made this year have been using these, and I want to try doing something similar with the rainbows as well. So that's just something to keep a remembrance out for. If you have a bunch of washi tape and you're sitting there going, I really need to make a card, but I don't know what to do with the background, and I don't want to ink blend, and I don't want to spray, and I don't want to use Copics or stamping or anything, but I really want something, your washi tapes can sometimes do something cool too. Alright, I think that's it. I'm looking around going, what have I forgotten? I think that's it. If I've missed a particular kind of medium that perhaps you really like, and you want to share it with everybody, please leave it down below. I know I didn't go into the particular amount of detail about anything, but I hope I've shown enough examples for you to kind of get the idea of what each of them do and how they work. If you have any more questions or anything you want to ask, please leave it down below. Or of course you can find me on any of my social medias. They're all listed for you down below as well. I'm trying to pack this all like into the same shot while I'm packing up. Oh, I did forget one. Sorry. I'm just going to really quickly talk about embossing powders. This definitely falls in nice to have. You don't have to have embossing powders, and I think I'll talk about them a little bit more. Actually, let's leave it. Let's not talk about embossing powders. I'm going to talk about embossing powders in my next video, which is going to be the nice to haves. I'm going to talk about my Misty. I'm going to talk about scoreboards. I'm going to talk about embossing powders. All those sort of things. If you have anything that you think is a nice to have that you think I should put in that video, please let me know, either message or social media or something. You'll find me. I hope you guys enjoyed this one. If you did, give it that big old thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe. Go back and check out the other videos in this series if you are interested in something else. I hope you have an absolutely awesome rest of your day, and I'll catch you again in my next video. Sending lots of huggles. Bye!